Yeah. Oh, look at these two. All right, come on. You're okay? Oh, what? Either they're having an affair or they're just very shy.
Wow.
Oops.
But what are the odds of that happening?
Oh my gosh.
I mean, holy shit.
60,000 people in a concert venue, and it just happens to catch that. Yeah.
Do you know how many times I've been at an arena or a concert or a game and I'm wrong? Come on. I was like, pick me.
Yeah.
Welcome to Praxis Project. If you're a CEO, senior leader, or board member navigating the fast-evolving world of business, you have found your hub of actionable insight and no-nonsense discussion.
Welcome to Praxis Project. We're going to start today with another icebreaker. Marcus, you want to hit us with what that is?
What is a tiny, irrational hill that you're willing to die on? There is a right way to load the dishwasher and a wrong way, or a wrong way to eat pizza, or something like that. Or this pizza counts and that pizza doesn't, like St. Louis versus Chicago versus New York pizza. Or,
What's a St. Louis pizza?
I like it. I feel like I have to defend it. So St. Louis pizza is Imo's is the name of the brand that gets credit for it. It's IMO. But it's, I guess the best way to describe it is a cracker with a sweet red sauce and plastic cheese on it. I'm not making it sound good.
No.
But it's Provel cheese, very thin crust, like a cracker crust and sweet red sauce.
It sounds like an elevated charcuterie.
It's really good drunk food.
I love food. I'm like, me too, when I'm drunk at 3 a.m. and there's a taco truck. I'm a foodie, but it's not the same thing.
I would say definitely Chicago pizza, deep dish pizza. It's not pizza.
It's more like cake.
Is that your little hill that you're willing to die on?
That's my hill.
You know me. I'm New York pizza.
That's not pizza.
I'm going to have to go with the first thing that came to mind is loud chewing and chewing with your mouth. And is like, that's it. It is unacceptable. And that's a hill I'm willing to die on. It is just, no.
That trips my trigger too.
Everything.
I have two. One is food related, and that is eating on an airplane. So people will do this if you buy something and wait to eat it on the plane. There's nothing magical about when we get to cruising altitude. Eat that shit in the concourse. Don't bring it on the plane. We don't have to smell it or listen to you chew.
But the altitude makes the burger taste better.
There's something about Trump's wealth, the gold-platedness, the eating a bucket of KFC on his airplane.
Some people think that, I think. It's really crazy. And then the other thing is, it just absolutely drives me crazy if you're sitting at a stoplight and no one's going through the intersection. It just drives me insane.
I have a similar one on the driving thing. But like, how can you actually give someone feedback on this? You can't. When you're sitting at an intersection and you're going to turn left across traffic, but the person waits at the line. They don't move into the middle of the intersection. And the light changes and they don't go because they couldn't go. You just wasted at least one car length of people waiting. Like, just go. So I don't know. I suppose I could get out of my car, run up and be in their face. That's probably not the best idea.
You're a New Yorker. That's standard behavior there.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Marcus. Our topic today is going to be relationships in the office. We reflect back to summer of 25 and the now famous Kiss Cam event at the Coldplay concert. This is an interesting moment for organizations to think about transparency and policies. And sometimes we think that they're too much. We don't really need them. But honestly, transparency and policies around interoffice relationships aren't just nice to have. It's probably the only thing keeping you out of becoming a TikTok meme or your C-suite becoming a TikTok meme, which is not what any of us want.
Like you said, Barry, I think when the topic gets brought up, I think people's initial reaction is like, oh, no relationships in the workplace. And I think it is very common. There are a lot of people who have businesses they founded with their spouse or they work with their spouse. But I think it's one, the transparency about it, and two, the power dynamics and realizing how that can interject a different dynamic in the workplace. It introduces different loyalties and introduces coalitions of people. So I think in general, employees don't form opinions about their workplace just based on how they're treated. They're based on how their peers are treated. And so there's more risk there from the employer.
Wow. I feel like we could go three different directions with with the comments you just made. One is an organization started by a couple, let's say a married couple, And what is that like to join, work for, operate in an organization where obviously it's going to be known and clear that there are two people here who are involved in this company that are married or have a long-term relationship. And it can create some very strange power dynamics around, well, I don't know, if I work for the one spouse, but the other spouse is like CEO, then how am I navigating if something I want to do, if my boss probably doesn't want to do it, but I think I can convince the other one? Is it sort of like, don't ask mom, ask dad, because he'll say yes. It just creates some interesting dynamics. So that's sort of one, right? Working for an organization that has that structure. The second is just overall kind of policies in the workplace, right? Is it legal? Can I actually prevent it and hold people accountable and fire people for having a relationship in the office? That's a legal question for you.
Oh, man, shoot, I was hoping you'd direct that to Valerie. I don't know what would prevent that, but I would also question the wisdom of that policy because, like you said, we spend a lot of time at work. If you have a good employee who happens to start a relationship with someone else in the company who they don't work with every day or their work isn't interdependent, is that really a hill you want to die on as an employer? You got to get out of here. To me, it's not the fact that the relationship exists. It's the transparency and then the safeguards that you have in place around that. And some are clearly inappropriate, right? You can't have a relationship between a manager and a subordinate. That just is not going to work. And I would probably recommend a policy against that.
Fair. Valerie?
It's interesting because I don't know legally if you can get fired, but clearly there can be a lot of legal exposure in this. So I think there is, in fact, exposure, maybe not directly in a fireable offense. This was so salacious when it first came out. It was crazy. And why? It's because it's the CEO and the CHR, or the head of HR. So everybody, the comments were wild. I looked up this company. I actually had not ever heard of Astronomer, but apparently it's a unicorn company. And so it has this $1 billion valuation. And so I know because it was just in the thick of this, but some from governance and disclosure perspective, that's something that could greatly impact an issue with trying to raise money, any sort of fundraising that would come up. So I'd say, I don't know where the policing on policies could come to play, but for sure you'd have to disclose. There would certainly have to be a disclosure on this. And then, in a frothy valuation company like this, I feel like your revenue, your clients, you're beholden to what your reputation is.
I think that's a good point. The EO and CHRO is probably the worst possible combination, and that's interesting too, because I think employees have some justified expectation of confidentiality when they're talking with HR.
Right.
But it's not the same as the privilege you would expect when talking with a lawyer, your personal lawyer, right? HRO, all of HR works for the company. So what you say to them, their job is to protect the company. But having a relationship with the CEO takes it, I think, a different step.
I agree. That's your worst case examples. And it falls into the power dynamic issue because presumably the CEO's at the top. So everyone ultimately is reporting into the CEO, which then shouldn't the policy be your CEO shouldn't have and can't have, unless it's sort of, again, started that way. But it seems very difficult for the CEO to start a relationship with someone in the company at any point in time, given the power dynamics, and then to do so with the head of HR. So that's a big flag. One of the interesting thoughts around mitigating strategy, policy, what steps could organizations think about taking was aligning the HR lead to have some sort of dotted reporting line into the board directly. Yeah. And that could be like, you could cover a number of things with that. But one of those things could be just monitoring relationship issues or concerns in the organization and just ensuring that we have protocols in place, that we have policies in place. Policing it is an interesting word. How do you do that if people don't disclose it? For the most part, I think people are going to be smart enough to not have PDA, public display of affection, in the office if they haven't reported it, or even if they have. Is it appropriate to have an annual process where if I'm going to, I don't know, maybe I'm signing the handbook every year because there are updates that come in, and part of that is a disclosure around relationships, right? And have you disclosed it? Some version of that could be interesting to think about for organizations that want to put that extra step in place.
It's interesting because if you went that route, you need to disclose relationships. And you can have that just as a general policy. I don't know if you would need best practice, right? If you update the handbook, have people acknowledge it. But even if you don't do that, if you have a policy that says you have to disclose any romantic relationships in the workplace, the discipline to the employees would then be failure to disclose. It wouldn't be the fact that you're in a relationship. It would be, hey, we need to know about it. And you didn't let us know. And I think the underlying thing, power dynamics, the ways that it can get awkward, I think it messes with the duty of loyalty that the employee owes to their organization. I think the relationship introduces a potential dynamic where are your loyalties to the company or are your loyalties to your romantic partner?
Yeah, and I think Valerie, to your point too, around the implications from not only from a fundraising perspective, but I would think there would be concern from a CFO's perspective on allocation of resources and bias potentially internally around who's getting what.
That's the first thing that came to mind. I got really deep into the comments when this came out. It was just the most unfathomable type of exposure. So one, for sure, optics. It's everyone in that company is going to be thinking, oh, I remember when I was asking for a budget for a new hire and that didn't get approved. It's just an example of all different scenarios where if not intentional, it could always be perceived as a slight because of this, a very visible bias or connection or relationship. So that's one. Two, I think there's a psychological safety element where we're always going to question, oh, is there a preference or is this a really sober view or is this really clear decision making? It's going to be hard to escape that. So I think that's really important nowadays. This is what all the young kids are saying, but psychological safety is really important in the through line of retention and how people are working and how people are feeling at work.
That's a great point. I totally agree with that. And along that same line of psychological safety, if we're acknowledging relationships in the workplace are likely to happen at some level of probability, and we put in place a policy around it to say that they have to disclose it, we also follow this thread. There are implications when that relationship doesn't work out for others, for those individuals, for processes, etc. So is there a line that we should be providing support for that? Someone discloses it. Do we check in on the relationship regularly? How are you guys doing? Are things going well?
When a relationship ends, that's when you could be in a sexual harassment situation, right? Because the employer has a responsibility to prevent that in the workplace. And if the advances aren't welcome, then it's no longer just trying to re-engage with my former partner. It's harassment because you can't do it in the workplace.
So then we should have a disclosure policy for the end of the relationship as well. No?
I think so. I think what would usually happen is probably the employee would complain, hey, I was in a relationship with this person. I'm not anymore. And they're trying to woo me again at work and it makes me uncomfortable. And the employer can't put their hands up and say, well, you guys were dating, so we can't do anything. No, you absolutely need to do something because you have a responsibility to protect the workplace.
Is it? I don't know. Interesting. I'd never thought about a disclosure policy for the end of the relationship. At the end of the day, the employer's job is to protect the workplace from harassment type issues. But is that going too far to ask for you to tell me when it's ended? And again, then can I fire you because you didn't disclose the relationship ended? Because you failed to disclose? This gets sticky.
It's very sticky. But like you said, I don't know that it's preventable. I think it's going to happen. I think it's just another risk that the employer needs to be vigilant.
And that the concept of psychological safety, I'm really glad you brought that up, Valerie. It's an interesting one too when you think about the safety of the workplace. And we want to make it a place where people want to be. So these are just sort of natural outcomes. But sure, there is no one great solution here. I think organizations need to take time to consider what their options are and whether that's policies, processes, practices. Is it an annual disclosure that you ask people to just as a reminder? What are you doing when people do disclose? What steps do you take other than I've registered it? If you're going to say you have to disclose it, you've got to disclose how that has to be disclosed. What is the process? Who are you telling? And then I think from a psychological safety perspective, I would, if I was in that case, if let's say I was having a relationship with someone at work, I'm going to disclose it. I want to know what that means. I got to tell HR, but what am I telling them? And then what does HR do with that once I've told them? Just so that there's clarity and transparency in the process. It can't be just a form. But then I think people are going to be less likely to submit that form if there's not clarity around what happens next, Who gets told? What are the implications? How do I know that it's not going to affect me and my promotability and my performance view? All those sorts of things come into play.
My thought immediately went to HR gets notified. They probably have some responsibility to talk to anyone who may be affected by it on a need to know basis, right? Because we're asking managers to police sexual harassment or to, even just from a productivity standpoint, more confidentiality standpoint, knowing that that's not a put it on the company intranet. Hey, everyone, let's congratulate them on starting a relationship. It's, you may need to know this because of where you work and what you do.
Yeah.
And the CEO, CHRO, terrible example, but I think in general, the stakes get much higher as the person involved in the relationship is higher in the company org chart, right? And people will start to question loyalty. They'll start to question judgment. And so probably not a great idea for executives.
I mean, we all talked about how much risk there is. So it's just one, disclosure, and two, the parties are acknowledging that they know the risk. And I think at a minimum, that's all I can think of in terms of what's a minimum need without getting into the nuances of relationship status.
Thinking about the power dynamics takes the executive tier largely out of the equation, which I think might be a really healthy thing to do at the executive level, to have a policy that if you're at a certain level, inter-office relationships are just not allowed, not going to happen, and the consequences are departure if it happens. And then below that, it's line of reporting.
I think what you said there about not allowable, I think that's important for the disclosure, the employees understanding that, hey, glad you told us, but if this doesn't work, or if, because relationships can be messy, it may result in one or both of you having to exit the organization.
All right. Excellent. Well, would love your thoughts and comments below. Let us know what you think. Let us know if you've seen some great policies or bad ones. And we'd love to hear more and have some dialogue. But otherwise, give us a like and a follow, and we will see you next time on Praxis Project. All right.
Scandalous.
Scandalous. That was fun.